Good evening and welcome to our Lolo Community Club Candidate Forum. Thank you for making this a priority. I really do feel that this is important, that voters are informed, and we get to hear right from the candidates. And so thank you for making this a priority and coming tonight. And candidates, I know you're busy. You're really busy. I've been there. It's a lot of work. Thank you for coming and making this also a priority tonight. So my name is Luanne Hansen. I'm the Vice President of the Lolo Community Club. We are a 501c3 organization. We own the ball fields next door. We have a rental site out back in this facility right here. And so we do all of this volunteer. It's quite a project. Complimentary coffee, again, bottled water, refreshments are all in the back. Just feel free anytime to get up and help yourself. Restrooms are to the back, men on the right and women on the left. Use those anytime that you feel like you need to. So on behalf of our board of directors, we have a 7-member board. I do want to, again, welcome you. It's a pleasure to host tonight's candidate forum. This presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as a part of a media assistance in-kind grant donated to the Lolo Community Club by MCAT. This event is being aired live on MCAT, Channel 189, and MCAT Facebook Live. It will also be downloaded to MCAT Video on Demand for a playback at a later date. Thank you to the Missoula Community Access Television for this community grant and for broadcasting tonight's community event. I invite all of you to stand and to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, I want to introduce our forum moderator, Mr. Dale Ollinger. Dale Ollinger is our superintendent at Lolo Elementary School, right here in Lolo. He will give expectations and ground rules for candidates and for the audience. Thank you to Dale for agreeing to moderate tonight's candidate forum.
Thank you, Luanne. I'm honored to be up here tonight. I know you're all not here to listen to me. I will do my best to honor that agreement that we have made just right now. I will give some ground rules. I hope everybody can play nice. I might have to remind other folks who are showing up a little bit late to play nice as well. We're going to get into this. We're going to probably deviate from all the rules and the orders and everything that we've got here just because it's a little bit less formal sometimes here in Lolo, but we'll keep tonight moving because you're here to hear the candidates and we're going to make sure you get to. We're not going to have any substitutes or surrogates or stand-ins, but these candidates are here in person tonight. Thanks again, Luanne said that, but you all have lots of places you could be right now. We're going to refrain during the questions and answers from applause or jeering from the audience. Mostly that's not to shut you down, it's just to keep things moving along, and it's not a popularity contest tonight. You get to do that with your ballot later on. Candidates are going to be introduced by their full names. We'd ask the candidates to remain seated. Not that we don't want you to stand, but we're also filming here tonight, and that's difficult for a camera person to try and follow someone around the room. Time limits on responses will be observed. There's a timekeeper. Thank you, Michelle, for being volunteering to do that. I'll remind you about the times when we get to the different responses.
I missed the meeting.
You missed a meeting and this is what happens. No, thank you very much. All questions from the audience need to be submitted in writing. And I know Luanne mentioned that. At any time you'd like to get up and go drop a question in the appropriate bowl, please do. There's going to be folks sorting through those, combining like questions, and then bringing them to me so that I can read them. I don't have the ability to multitask like that. I'm just not that good. I'll read all the questions. I might restate them. Candidates, this is not a debate. I hope you were coming here expecting that. Everybody will get a chance to answer. Please don't interrupt each other or argue. That's not what I signed up for. Not a referee, a moderator. And we will keep this to the specified 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So when it's over, it's over. Okay? Nobody needs to be here until 11 o'clock tonight. All right. With that, we're going to actually start getting into some real business here. I'm going to pass out a microphone so we can get to it. The first thing we've got to... Checking this one. Hey, it works as well. That's neat. Okay, good. We're starting with our Justice of the Peace office, and I have a different order than the people are seated in, so I'm going to go with what's on my paper. I think it starts with district or office 1, which is... Before, I shouldn't have done that. We do have one candidate who is not able to be here tonight and sent a statement. So, in the absence of that person, I will read the statement. It starts off a little confusing. 2 minutes. 2 minutes for candidate introductions. 2 minutes. 2 minutes? This will not take 2 minutes. I am not Jeremiah Peterson. It starts out. My name is Jeremiah Peterson. I'm running for Missoula County Sheriff. I have worked at the Sheriff Office for 21 years under 4 sheriffs. I've held several positions, including Patrol Sergeant, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Commander, and Captain of Operations at the Detention Facility. Currently, I am a coordinator of search and rescue, and I have been a coordinator for the Crisis Intervention Team, bringing mental health professionals together with law enforcement to help our most vulnerable community members. I am genuine, hardworking, and committed to Missoula County. Our communities deserve the best safety and service the Sheriff's Office can provide. I can and will deliver for Missoula County, and I will do it in the most fiscally responsible manner possible. I would appreciate your vote on November 8th. Thank you. Jeremiah Peterson, candidate for sheriff. All right, candidates, you now have 2 minutes to give an introduction as you wish. We're going to go with Missoula County Justice of the Peace, Department 1. This is a nonpartisan race. We'll begin with Alex Beale.
First off, can you hear me okay? All right.
Stand up, please.
They asked us to sit down.
We can't see you in the back of the room.
It's for the video, ma'am.
Didn't bother me.
Okay, you may stand at your chair.
All right. I won't move, I promise. I'm going to, if it's all right, I'm going to restart. Okay. Now, I'm Alex Beale. I am your elected Justice of the Peace here for Missoula County. Also a Lolo resident, have been for the last 20 years. Familiar with this room. I've been to a lot of baseball games here outside. Always happy to be here. Always happy to be here for the folks on Lolo. 2 minutes is not a lot of time, but here's what I can tell you about. I am an attorney before I was a judge. I have 17 years of experience doing that, doing all different kinds of law, criminal law, civil law. I think it's important to know, I go first, I get to do this part, what a Justice of the Peace is. We're not district court judges. We do not handle felony cases, sentences on those. We're not municipal court judges. Those are the city ones. Deal with city police and city limits, downtown types of stuff. We don't deal with that one bit. I'm asking for your vote today because I think I've done a good job in my first term, and I'm asking you to return me for another 4 years. The first thing that we did when I got there is we took what were 2 courts, Justice Court, and combined them into one. It was very wasteful before, wasteful of your tax dollars, but also it was confusing. There were 2 different sets of procedures, and all of that made it very difficult for just the average person to understand what they were supposed to do. The second thing we did was make it into a court of record, which means that everything that happens there stays. Before that, not a court of record. When there was an appeal, the whole thing would start over again. So if you were a juror, you wasted your time. If you were a victim in a crime and you got a good outcome, you wasted your time. Primarily, though, not enough time to talk about me. I'll talk about the people who do like me. I have the endorsement of every single elected judge in Missoula. I have the endorsement of tons of law enforcement. Ask me about it afterward. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Burt.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. My name is Bill Burt. I'm a lifelong Montana resident. I likewise have spent the last 20 years in Missoula, 18 of those being here in Lolo. Very familiar with this room with Pinewood Derby, rain gutter regattas, 13 years coaching as a Little League coach in the fields out behind this building. And the most important part, the last 17 years I spent as a deputy with the Sheriff's Office here in Missoula. I'm running for Justice of the Peace because of the rising crime rates in Missoula, the frustration amongst law enforcement at the revolving doors at the jail, people being released with little or no consequence, repeat offenders. There's oftentimes that there are people that are booked into jail 2 and 3 times per day just because of how quickly they're being released. It's not just happening in justice court, it's happening in both our justice and municipal courts. Unfortunately, there's only one of me. What I'm asking you for today is to not just listen to what I have to say, not just believe what I have to say, but go talk to your local law enforcement officials. Everybody in this room knows somebody who is a highway patrolman, city police officer, deputy sheriff. Ask them, somebody who works for probation and parole, or maybe a detention officer, and see what kind of feedback you get from them. I think that this is a critical time for Missoula and Missoula County, and that not to steal somebody else's words, but it really is time for a change. Absent that change, we're really facing some issues here in Missoula. Populations here is expanding, crime rates are expanding, and without more accountability to the people committing these offenses, we're really going to be in some trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. Department 2, or now the Equine Department, Landy Holloway.
Hi, I'm Landy Holloway. I am your current Justice of the Peace, and I've been in that position for 6 years. I have 30 years of criminal justice experience. Prior to being a Justice of the Peace, I was a felony probation and parole officer for 21 years. The last 5 years of that was spent focusing on reentry efforts, working for the Governor's Task Force, and working inside of the prison and into the communities. I have a family. My husband currently works for the Office of Emergency Management. He's deployed on a hurricane disaster outside of Fort Myers. I have a 13-year-old son who's here under duress. Hi, Jackson. So my judicial philosophy focuses on public safety, accountability, and restorative justice. Justice of the Peace needs to be nonpartisan, ruled by the law, listen to everybody who comes before them in the courtroom. We need to make sure that the public is safe. The increasing population and the mental health issues and the fallout from COVID has created a community issue. It's not a court issue. We do our best to meet people where they are, to provide structure and sentencing conditions that will help people be the most successful person they can be in the community and protect our community as well. Drunk driving is a problem in our community, and I will tell you that one of the things that I've implemented is Road Court. Road Court stands for Responsibility, Opportunity, and Accountability for Drivers. It is a DUI treatment court. I'll tell you that in 5 years, I've brought in grant money with a team in the amount of $980,000. We have 27 graduates. That converts over to 786 days of jail time that has been diverted, which turns into $113,000 of taxpayers' dollars being saved. I'd like to thank you for having this event tonight. I would encourage you to vote for your incumbent Justices of Peace. Alex and I have worked very diligently to run an effective and an efficient court for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Campbell Renault.
Hello, my name is Susan Campbell Renault. I have lived in Missoula for 30 years. I lived 25 years on Blue Mountain, very close to Lolo. In fact, I shopped at your grocery store most of the time. I want to let you know that I am here for the same reason that Bill Burt is here. I am extremely concerned about the, Bill Burke has been a police officer. I have been an advocate for abused women and children and veterans. And for the last several months, I've been calling voters, and I have called 18,000 voters. And I've been hearing an earful about the people who are concerned about the level of crime and the tiny minority of people that are getting out and causing mayhem in our community. And that is why I'm running for justice of the peace. I have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, but not in criminology. I was a reporter covering crime. And I came from a big city, Washington, D.C., 30 years ago when my husband and I were transferred from the Boone and Crockett Club to here. And Missoula was a tiny, lovely little town. It is no longer a lovely little town. There's a lot of crime, and I am very scared. And I want to have it back closer to what it was like when I came here 30 years ago. I know we can't go back, but I think we need to be tougher on the criminals that are repeat offenders. I am the victim of a drunk driver that broke my neck and back. So I do not take lightly to giving lesser sentences to people that have committed over and over again.
Thank you very much. I'd like to let the audience know that at this time, I think our Justice of the Peace candidates need to actually attend virtually another candidate forum. And so at some point, they're going to excuse themselves and then probably return back to us. It's not that they don't want to hear their other fellow candidates, but they have another job to do, is what I've been told. So if that's accurate, then great. And if not, then I'll just let them be adults and handle themselves. This is good. Okay. So be it. Next up on my list here is Senate District 49, beginning with Willis Curdy.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Willis Curdy. I currently represent the Target Range, Orchard Homes, Fort Missoula area in the State House. I have for the last 8 years serving the good citizens of that area of Missoula. Just quickly, I was born and raised up here a few miles. My parents had a grade A dairy. I grew up milking cows and raising probably about 1,000 laying hens where we sold chickens around western Montana. So I came to school in Missoula on a football scholarship, and I graduated. I took a job at Hellgate High School teaching U.S. government, Montana history, and economics. During the summers, I was a wildland firefighter. I first worked on the Beale hot shot crew for 3 years. I was a U.S. Forest Service smoke jumper for 30 years. And I'm also a commercial pilot, and I flew for the Forest Service doing natural resource work from West Texas to Puget Sound. During my 8 years in the state legislature, I've worked with my good citizens in House District 98 to provide them adequate and competent representation. I represented as a person who represented them and not myself. I have worked with moderates on both sides of the aisle to get things done. We've done some great things over the 8 years that I've served in the House for the citizens of the state of Montana, and I want to continue to do that work as your next state senator. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight, and I look forward to the questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Sheehan.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the Lolo Community Club for holding this. And my name is Brad Sheehan. I have represented this district for the last 8 years, and it's been an honor to serve. And I don't use those terms lightly. It has been an honor, and it has been service, because everything I've done in Helena has not been generated of my own volition. It's come from listening to people. When I first started campaigning in 2014, I asked people what they wanted. And the reason I did that was because in my experience of life, I moved here in 1963 with my family, And we've been residents of Missoula pretty much ever since then. Graduated from Loyola High School, graduated from the University of Montana, taught here in town. But as a public servant, and that was precisely the reason I ran, I realized that the job that we have, the number one task of anyone who serves in a public office is to protect and defend the rights and freedoms of individuals. That's where it all begins. And as a history of political science and mathematics teacher, that was one of the things that I observed from what I learned both intellectually at the University of Montana and from reading. Because I'm a big student of history, I understand that we need to understand what's going on before so that we can take care of things that go on right now. I personally visited about 4,600 households in this whole district. And what I've heard from folks is that their number one, or their chief concerns are the economy, inflation, the crime in Missoula, the transient issue in Missoula, the high taxation, the unaffordable housing. Those are the things that are crippling people. And we cannot continue to increase taxes, which is what's been proposed by the other side of the aisle for the 8 years I've been in the legislature. In the city of Missoula, county of Missoula, we're going to see a 23% increase this year if it's voted through. And we can't afford to do that. The federal government has implemented all kinds of programs that have increased inflation and are causing folks in Missoula not to be able to live here any longer. So my objective is to hold taxes down, and at the state level we did that. We now have a $1.5 billion surplus that we need to give back. And I'm the only person who voted for that in Missoula County. So appreciate your vote when it comes up November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have candidates from House District 97. Lynn Hellegard.
Good evening, I'm Lynn Hellegard. I've also been in this meeting or in this room when we were trying to figure out how to bring mountain line service or some kind of transportation service to the community. My folks lived in Lolo until they passed away. My son lives in Lolo, so I feel I've got a vested interest in your community. And I want to bring what my knowledge and experience to you. I served 4 years on the Missoula City Council. One of the prime things I did was go after the budget, which Dave can attest to. But I've also spent 20 years in the financial industry, so I know budgeting, I know banking. I have run a nonprofit for 20 years, which has me knowing federal budgets, regulations, state, federal regulations. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is I have worked with the National Academies of Science on several research projects for the last 15 years. And one of the, I guess the best compliment I ever got was from one of the people at the National Academies of Science when I said, he put me on a panel that I had no idea why he put me there. And he said, I put you there because you think differently than everyone else that serves on these panels. And that's what I want to bring to you, somebody that thinks differently, because I believe we cannot keep doing things the same way we have. It is not working. We can't have tax increases every year. I've been over at the legislature. I've gotten bills passed that help seniors, adults with disabilities, veterans, tribal members. And I've done all of those bills, and they haven't raised your taxes 1 cent. I found other financing sources. So I want to bring that experience to you. I've got some great ideas on how we cannot have a resort tax imposed on this community, but we can bring the revenue that you need to get your infrastructure taken care of. Thank you. I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Now, Devin Jackson.
Thank you to the Community Club and to Superintendent Olinger for having us. My name is Devin Jackson. I'm pretty sure I had the shortest drive of anybody here tonight. I'm just on the other side of the creek over there. I spent 15 years on the Lolo Community Council, and I can tell you something about this district. It's massive, it's huge, but no single part of it is inside Missoula city limits. I am the only candidate in this race who has any experience representing people that choose to live outside the city of Missoula. I had 7 years as secretary and 5 years as chair. In my first month as chair, the 2013 fires came in. It was a steep learning curve, but I figured out how to communicate and get results from federal, state, and local agencies. So in 2017, when the fire came in and almost destroyed our community, I was ready and better prepared to respond. I've been focused on how to do things to help this community because those of us here have very different concerns than the people in Missoula City. One of the main things we do need is property tax relief. Our working class families and our seniors on fixed income cannot sustain this. I know when I got my bill, I looked at it and said, that doesn't fit my budget. I think we're going to get that done in the next session, but it's going to come down to people who actually want to help their communities and the people that need that help, because seniors on fixed income need relief. The Yellowstone Club doesn't. I really believe that Lolo deserves some representation from Lolo for once. And that's why I'm running. It really has been a situation where Missoula has represented us over and over again. And it's time that we actually have somebody that voices a concern for people that don't care what's happening in the city. Thank you. If you agree with that, like my signs say, community before politics, vote for me.
Thank you. Next up will be the candidates for Missoula County Commissioner, District 2, beginning with Kim Chambers.
Good evening, I'm Kim Chambers. I have never been in this building before, so I thank you for inviting me for the first time. I am running for Missoula County Commissioner. I am a builder and a developer and a property manager in Missoula. I know the ins and outs of our regulation system, and getting affordability back to our housing market and to our rentals is very important to me. I have been looking into our budgets and I watch our retirees. First of all, my mother-in-law, who is a widow and on a fixed income, and at the end of her budget was looking at a mere $1,000. And with this next tax hike, and if our bond levy goes through and the crisis levy, she will be taxed out of her home, and she's not the only one. We also lost about 15% of our first-time home buyers with the new increases in our taxes. I want to go in and I want to be a different voice at the table. I want to come in with a fiscal sounding board, and I want to ask the questions that I think need to be asked, and then the solutions that need to come out of all three county commissioners working together from different angles. I appreciate your vote, and I really hope that I can earn it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dave Stromer.
All right, thanks for hosting this tonight. My name's Dave Stromer. I'm one of your 3 Missoula County Commissioners. For those of you who don't know me, my background includes 2 terms on the Missoula City Council. I worked for years as a wildland firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. I worked in the private sector as a public historian. My wife is an Episcopal priest, and I have 2 teenage kids. And I am running for re-election because of the same reason I ran for election in the first place, and that is to give back to my community. I think it's important that us as citizens give back to our communities through public service. This is my way to do so. My philosophy of governance boils down to 3 main areas. First, shared leadership. Second, public investments, community investments. And third, land stewardship. Shared leadership. There are 11 independently elected county officials in Missoula County. The county commission is not at the top of the org chart. It's a pretty flat org chart, and we work together very well. And I think we want to keep that going into the future. An example of shared leadership across jurisdictional boundaries includes Missoula County spearheaded the creation of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, which has a great chance within the next 6 years to restore Amtrak service back through Missoula and Missoula County. Community investment ranges from the investments of nearly $1 million we're going to put into the water and wastewater facilities here in Lolo, to investing in infrastructure near the airport to support 6,000 units of new housing, to investing in basic services such as mental health service, addiction services. And finally, as it relates to land stewardship, climate change is real. We need to mitigate it. We need to keep our air and water clean. We need to keep those very values that make Missoula County a great place to live and raise a family. I would appreciate your vote, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Next office to be represented is Missoula County Attorney, and the candidate is Kirsten Pabst.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I have spent a lot of time in this room, but mostly with the backcountry horsemen saddling up pretend mules and auctioning off all kinds of horse tack. I am really proud and honored to serve as the Missoula County Attorney. This will be my 3rd term that I'm running for. I don't have an opponent, so in case you were wondering who my opponent was, I don't have one. But I felt like it was, I wanted to be here to talk a little bit about our work and to answer any questions that you have. I've been in this business for 28 years now. I supervise an office of 52 people. We have a civil division as well as the criminal prosecution division that most people associate with the office. Our civil division, though, is robust. I have a civil litigation team of 4 dedicated attorneys. We also have a dependent neglect unit that has 4 attorneys who represent the Department of Public Health in child abuse and neglect cases. And then we have 22 attorneys, most of which are criminal prosecutors with lots of different divisions. I'm probably most proud of our work in our Special Victims Unit. We've grown it from a traditional 1 person to 8.5 full-time positions. We've also taken a really hard look at criminal justice in general and ways that we can focus our limited resources, those precious criminal justice dollars, towards risk and the highest risk offenders. As a result, we have some innovative programs that have received national recognition. Our Calibrate program is Montana's first ever prosecution-led pretrial diversion program. We just enrolled our 100th enrollee in that program just this last week, so we're really proud of that. We've won national awards for our secondary trauma program. I've done a lot of work with the National DA's office and continue to do that on their board of directors. So thank you, and I'm here to answer questions later.
Thank you very much. Our next candidates are for Missoula County Auditor. We'll begin with Sandra Vasica.
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. My name is Sandra Vasica and I'm running for Missoula County Auditor. I graduated from Sentinel High School in Missoula in 2009 and then I went to Montana State University. I know we have a house divided, where I graduated with 2 business degrees. And while I was there, I was honored to be president of our MSU Toastmasters Club, so I have to give a special shout out to our timer tonight. After that, I came home to Missoula, where I married my high school sweetheart, kind of. We fell in love after high school. But now we have a 1.5-year-old child. His name is Alexander, and he just learned how to walk last month, so everything is now in reach. That's very fun. My husband owns a flooring installation company. He's from Potomac, so he has been raised here his whole life, and so he understands the frustrations that happen with what's happening with the growth of Missoula. And in turn, I understand the frustrations as well. And my second job, I guess my first job is I work as an executive assistant for an insurance agency in town. I've been there for 6 years. If it hasn't been for my wonderful mentor of a boss and my husband, I wouldn't have been, not really pushed, but they wanted me to spread my wings and fly. And then so in 2019, I won the city council race. And so this is my 3rd year on Missoula City Council. And I want to spread my wings and fly even higher because I really want to protect your tax dollars. In 2020, my very nice opponent here did a 5% bid preference based on the color of your skin and your gender. And while I do believe that those are things that you shouldn't, oh gosh, 15 seconds later. I don't believe that that is what you should do to do a bid preference. I think that you should be basing bid preferences on the bid procurement processes, on the best quality of work for the smallest dollar. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if we could pass that the other way. David Wall.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. My name is David Wall. I am your current Missoula County Auditor. I was born and raised in Florida. I apologize. I was just a baby though. I didn't know what I was doing. Moved here in 2007 to Montana, to Missoula. I do have a wife. My wife and I do not have any children or even any pets. Overall, I can't say this about my wife, but I am kind of a pretty boring fellow. which is perfect for a county auditor. That's just actually what you want. I do have 2 bachelor's degrees. My first one is from Florida State University in criminology. My second one is an accounting degree from MSU Billings. I have been with the auditor's office since 2015, and I became the county auditor in 2017 when my boss and mentor, Barbara Behrens, retired. I learned how to be a county auditor from her. And one of the things she taught me is that being the person that looks over everyone's shoulder yelling, "Gotcha," if there's a mistake made, is not going to get you good relationships, and it's not really even going to make people more compliant. It's really about building relationships and building trust and building systems that will prevent mistakes from happening in the first place. That's definitely how I try to do things. As far as the bid process goes, we do give a 5% bid preference, but that company has to be registered as a disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE, with the state of Montana Department of Transportation. There are a lot of ways to be a DBE. It is true that some of those are by race or by gender. Some are by physical disability. But you do have to be registered. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but certainly not least, and racing in from somewhere else in the state, no doubt, we've got a couple of our candidates for the United States Congress. We'll begin with Mr. John Lamb.
Thank you so much. We're running late. We had another forum debate in Polson today. Great crowd there, nice people, and I enjoyed answering their questions today. I live in a little town called Norris, Montana, about 45 miles out west of Bozeman. I live there with my wife and 12 children. We have a couple of small businesses we run and own, and a farm. We love Montana, and we love Montana values. I am a libertarian. I'm a Ron Paul libertarian. I believe in liberty and freedom, and my goal is to fight for that liberty and freedom and our constitutional rights. I like to tell everybody I have 2 morals that guide me. One is the 10 Commandments, and the other is the Constitution. I believe both documents are very important to guide us through life. The 10 Commandments gave us so much to look at for how to treat our neighbor, and not stealing, not cheating, and just so on. And the Constitution backs that in so many ways by giving us so much freedom and protects us from God-given rights that protect us from overreaching government in our lives. So I'm a big advocate for prisoners that have been wrongfully charged. I've been fighting years and years for different people across this country. I've been in more federal prisons and state prisons than most prisoners have been, visiting prisons in many, many states, just checking out their stories and advocating for their release if they've been in there wrongfully. So that's one of my biggest passions if I get elected to Congress, is fighting for the people that don't have a voice and standing up for them, and prison reform, helping people get out of prison that don't deserve to be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next, Monica Trunnell.
Did you get a speeding ticket on the way down here? I didn't either. Thank you so much, everyone, for having us. I'm Monica Trunnell, and we just came racing down from Polson. So a little bit about me and my background. I grew up in eastern Montana on a ranch with my 9 brothers and sisters. I had as many classmates as I did siblings. I played Class C basketball, and I went on to compete in 2 Olympics, and when I came home, I thought I was pretty hot stuff, and people would say, "Are you Jenny's sister?" Because she won 3 state championships in high school basketball. So we have our priorities straight here in Montana. I have put over 42,000 miles on my minivan, traveling this new congressional district, which is 16 counties and 2 tribal nations, lying roughly between Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks. So the things that I have heard, the top issues facing us in western Montana, we got this new seat because of the 2020 census. We're the first state to lose a seat and then get it back. And since 2020, we've had the highest growth in the country. So the top issues that I have heard traveling this district are housing, housing, and housing. And this is something that we just absolutely have to get a handle on. I've talked to so many people, teachers. We have the lowest starting pay for teachers in the country, and law enforcement, engineers, people with jobs are living in their RVs. We need to change this. We've got to absolutely get a handle on what is happening in this Western District. So I think I've heard a lot of folks here tonight talking about relationships, and I think that's absolutely what it's about. I have heard, as I have traveled this district, gone to parades, rodeos, listened to our county commissioners, talked to city councils, I've heard a yearning for connection and for community, to be the Montana that I grew up in, that I know and that I love, where we look at our problems and we solve them, and we put some of this division and this othering and this, all of this fighting, set it aside and be the Montana that I know, where we vote for people, not parties. I'm asking you for your vote on November 8th as a person who can serve and represent and make Montana proud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can share for the microphone around. So while this was all going on, there was a lot of work going on in the back. And we've got a series of questions here. I think we're going to go in the same order of offices. I might swap the order of when you get to answer. We'll reverse that just for fun. And first round. Yeah, like that. Thank you. And thank you. Definitely could not have done that. Okay, I'm going to bring the microphone. This is scary. We'll start with Mr. Burt this time. So for this round, we're hoping that we kind of pulled some numbers out of the sky here, but we're going to give you 90 seconds to answer the question. All right? So, I did not bring my glasses. What is your primary goal for justice of the peace should you win?
As stated from the very beginning of this, my role and my desire to get involved with this is to contribute to reduce crime and make Missoula County a safer place. Seeing a lot of repeat offenders being released back onto the streets, my goal in all of this I disagree in one sense. I think Justice Court is one of the most important courts that we have, just being that unless it's a misdemeanor offense that occurs within the city limits, all other offenses start with Justice Court. And so Justice Court has a really important role in determining what happens with offenders and when they're arrested and brought before the court. So I guess just in short, my primary role or purpose would be to contribute to reduction of crime.
Thank you. Mr. Beale.
Thank you. The number one thing I would do is continue to do what I have been doing. It is easy to look at what is occurring in our nation and in our state and in our county and say, oh, that must be the fault of judges. It's not. There are rising crime rates in America, in the state of Montana, and in Missoula County. And if you look at them, there's a remarkable thing about them. They're almost identical in each and every one of them. There's not a problem in Justice Court with people being released with low bonds. There's not a problem in Justice Court with people receiving light sentences. If there was, I wouldn't have the support of every other judge in Missoula. I wouldn't have the support of former Sheriff Ibsen, Chief of Police Muir, 2 undersheriffs, and just numerous law enforcement. So I really do ask you, as Mr. Burt does, to go and talk to law enforcement, ask them what they think, and I think you'll be surprised by the answer.
Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Renault this time. Again, the question is, what is your primary goal for justice of the peace should you win?
My primary goal is to bring safety back to the people that I love in Missoula, which is 99.9% of us that are law-abiding citizens. We pay our bills, we go to the grocery store, we take our kids to baseball games, and we don't want to be looking over our shoulder wondering if a felon has been let out. We don't want to go to the county fair and wonder if our 4-year-old is going to be kidnapped. So my primary reason that I am here is to make sure that the Office of the Justice of the Peace is here to bring peace. And that would be in everything that I do. I also want to make sure that I listen to every single person that comes before me. Because in this country, you are absolutely innocent until you are proven guilty. And so I don't want to have anybody assume that coming to me means that just because they've been accused of a crime, that they are guilty. They are not. In my eyes, they are innocent until the evidence proves them differently.
Ms. Holloway?
I would continue doing what we're doing. Justice Court is running efficiently. We have 12 staff members. We collaborate with other departments in the county, something that hasn't been seen in the past. I would continue to expand road court in having more DUI offenders. I wish we could get rid of DUI offenders in the sense that no other DUIs were committed in the community, but I want more of them to come into our program so that we can change behavior and change lives. I would love to not have to chase grants as a judge going above and beyond my job. I'd like to go to the county or the city and look for some streamlined funding because we're doing things that haven't been done before in the court, and we're effective in reducing impaired drivers, and we're effective in getting people their driver's licenses and moving forward. We'll continue to treat people with dignity and respect as they come before the court. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question is for our Senate District 49 folks. We'll begin with Mr. Cheetah. Question reads, we strongly support our Lolo public school and fund it with our property taxes. Mr. Cheetah and Mr. Curdy, explain your position on taking funding from public schools and giving it to private schools.
Public dollars need to remain public. But what we have in Montana, being one of only 8 states that do not have public charter schools, is a lack of competition. And I remember during one of my terms, a gentleman who was at the time the head of the MEA or MFT, who's passed away, said, we have choice in Montana. And I looked at him and I thought, how could that be? And he said, well, if you're in Missoula, you could go to Big Sky, Sentinel, or Hellgate. Now, they do have some different programs, but they're public schools. And to me, that was like saying, we have choice. We have 3 McDonald's in Missoula. You can get a Big Mac at the one on West Broadway, you can get a Big Mac at the one on East Broadway, or you can get a Big Mac out at the Y. So we need to allow the dollars to follow children and allow those students to go to schools where there's competition. And there should be charter schools that allow individuals to set up programs that might be STEM-based. So you've got science, technology, engineering, and math. There might be some that deal more in the medical arts. But those dollars, those public dollars, they're going to remain with public schools. And I think what we need to do is focus on creating competition, because right now we don't have it, and that is hurting the development and outcome of our students in not only in Missoula, but in Montana as a state.
Mr. Curdy?
Thank you. I'm adamantly opposed to taking our public dollars and giving them to private schools. Number one, it violates Montana state constitution. Okay? That should be enough to convince folks that that doesn't work. I also don't believe in taking our public dollars and giving it to a private business to run our schools. We already have schools in Missoula. We have a health academy at Big Sky. We have a math academy. We have other type of technical academies within our schools. Kids float back and forth from school to school if they want to. And when it comes down to competition, we do have private schools in Missoula. They fit other parents and adults' needs. But we don't need to take public dollars and give it to a private company to run our schools. Period.
Thank you both. The next question will be for our House District 97 candidates. We'll begin with Mr. Jackson. Question. Do you support our constitutional right to privacy and the right to choose?
I 100% support the Montana State Constitution. Our individual rights, which is guaranteed in there, the right to privacy, come before the state or the federal government. This is not a state issue, this is not a federal issue, this is our individual right to make decisions based on ourselves. Helena doesn't get a seat in our doctor's offices. They don't get to know what books I read. They don't get to know how many guns I buy. That's what that right to privacy means. I'm standing for it. I'm not standing for it because of that's the way the party is. If you'll notice, I've got a sign out in front of Hayloft. I'm the first Democrat in over 2 decades to do that because I'm running as a Bitterrooter first. I've gotten into clashes with the commissioners. I got myself into some political trouble over it because I'm not running for a party. I'm running for our community. And so I make this decision because the Montana way of life says we have a right to privacy, and I'm going to stand for that.
Thank you. Ms. Auditor?
I also believe in the Constitution. I've also received awards when I was on City Council for adhering to the Constitution. I will not pass any law that is deemed unconstitutional. That's the first test that I use when I look at a bill. Does it meet constitutional, whether it's federal or state? So if it doesn't meet those, I'm not going to vote for it. And I've got a record to prove that I'm not going to vote for it. I'm not just saying I'm not going to vote for it, I've got proof. So yes, right to privacy is very important. Also, I have a real problem with some of the things that are going on with our right to privacy and search and seizure. Those are being violated, and they shouldn't be. So again, we need to start thinking differently. I think we've ceded a lot of our states' rights to the federal government. And in order to help ourselves and our neighbors, we need to start taking those rights back and instituting them in what we do with the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question will be directed for the Missoula County Commissioner candidates. We'll begin with Mr. Stromer. Please describe how your experience makes you the best candidate for Lolo. What is your perception of Lolo's greatest needs?
Thanks for that question. So part of my resume that I discussed a little bit earlier is working for federal land management agencies. I think it's no great surprise that us living in these landscapes in western Montana, throughout the West, are prone to wildfire. And we have to take measures to mitigate and adapt to living in these sorts of landscapes. And so with that in mind, we are undertaking in this coming fiscal year being more aggressive in terms of looking at ways to help in your home ignition zone to address the risk that you face from wildfire. That's an important piece. The other, and that's from a land management standpoint, which my experience is extensive. Secondly, from an infrastructure standpoint and a community planning standpoint, I think Michelle might have brought it up earlier. It's long overdue that this community update its land management vision for this this area, this community. What does Lolo want to be when it grows up, essentially? And we need to take a hard look at those land management documents that we have on the books right now and adapt them to that vision for the 21st century. Investing in infrastructure, my experience is extensive in this regard. And as I also mentioned earlier, we recognize the need to have solid water, wastewater facilities that not only supports residential development, but also commercial development. We are making those investments as we speak.
Thank you. Ms. Chambers?
Thank you for the question. I actually am very concerned that most of our rural communities, like Lolo, are not being heard from our commissioners. I want to stand up and I want to make sure that they have a voice just as strong as the city proper or the citizens that are right around Missoula. I was very shocked when I heard that there was a proposal to put a resort tax on a community that is so very close to Missoula. I stood up at your community meeting and I said, please, please give us an opportunity to look for other ways, because a resort tax in this small community would not only tax your citizens out of their groceries, their goods, their services, but would put a burden on you, and you would not be able to pay for your sewer line that you were supposed to be responsible for through that resort tax. So as county commissioner, I would vow to come down and hear the voices of Lolo, and on a quarterly basis have community meetings with all 3 commissioners so that you could see their eyes and talk to them directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question to Ms. Pabst. How will you be dealing with vagrancy and drug use in Missoula County?
With what? I'm sorry.
Vagrancy and drug use in Missoula County.
Thank you. I get that question a lot about vagrancy, and to be quite honest with you, it's not necessarily a challenge that's in my lane. I would defer to my colleagues over at the city when we're talking about vagrancy within the city limits. We have occasionally challenges in the donut area, which is our jurisdiction, but those are very seldom in view. And what was the other one?
Drug use.
Drug use. Yeah, so drug use is really one of the greatest drivers of crime in our community and in this county. Right now, our greatest challenge is methamphetamine, and it has been since probably about 2014. Heroin was gradually overtaking methamphetamine when it came to use, abuse, and distribution. Now, the new danger on the streets, we've all heard, is fentanyl, which is hundreds of times stronger than heroin. With methamphetamine, we see people slowly degrading their ability to have empathy, their ability to make solid judgments, their ability to be healthy. And eventually, methamphetamine addiction without treatment will land someone in jail or in prison. Thank you. Fentanyl, sadly, is taking lives. We're seeing lots of people die of overdose deaths. And so we're working with our community neighbors to engage in treatment and prevention efforts and education as well.
Thank you very much. Next questions for our Missoula County Auditor candidates. We'll start with Mr. Wall. How can you help ensure transparency in government?
That's a really good question. One of the things we have started doing in the auditor's office on our website, apart from just posting like RFPs, is to also post whenever there's a sole source exemption. We've been posting that on publicly on the website. We've also we have a place on our website where you can find our contracts for Missoula County. One of the things I really want to try and do is get one particular space where everyone can find, both the public and even internally, can find every county contract just to make searching for them easier. I think they should be available to everybody. And that's true of RFPs too. The RFP process, or any kind of procurement process, there are no black holes allowed in those. You have to be able to see inside every part of that process. That includes the scoring. So how do you determine which vendor is chosen? You can't just say, well, here's all the proposals, and we chose this one. You have to say, here's our score sheet. This is how we scored these things, and this is how we came to this decision. That's absolutely important because it's just not our money; it's your money. I think, and if there's any other ideas too about transparency, one of the things I like to do a lot is listen. And so, if you all have any ideas, please let me know. Just shoot me an email or something like that.
Thank you. Ms. Vasika, same question.
Thank you. We all have to agree that there has to be a lot more transparency. As a city councilor, I know how difficult it is to find out how to even get to the city council meeting agenda. And on the county webpage, I look and it took me a long time to figure out how to find all the bid proposals. So that obviously we all agree that something has to be done about that. And so as a younger generation person, I think that I will be able to get a lot of folks that can help us be announcing all the bid proposals on not just the website and not just the newspaper, but in other media enterprises. And with this position, I believe that with transparency, I don't believe that this should be a partisan hat. I think that I'm really frustrated that this is a partisan race because as an auditor, you should wear a neutral hat. You should take off your partisan hat and you should be able to look at this no matter what you think is right or where these dollars are spent are right or wrong. I think that no matter what you think, The commissioners make the budget. They make the budget, and those dollars are going to where they are voting to go, no matter what your personal beliefs are. So I think that we need to absolutely look at this and say, well, you know, I'm making sure that this money that went to the general fund is actually going to the general fund. These dollars that are going to the sheriff's department are actually going to the sheriff's department, are actually being used for that. And I would be very happy to bring social media into the aspect.
Thank you very much. This will round out our first set of questions. We'll begin with Ms. Trinell. The question starts with a statement. Montana needs to come together and work together. How will you lower the temperature in the area of public discourse?
I think the first part of that is showing up. Showing up everywhere and going everywhere. Going to places where we're not expected. Going to places where we're not wanted. So I've done that by putting 42,000 miles on my minivan, going to parades. I was the only Democrat who walked in the parade in Corvallis. And I've walked in the parades in Dillon. I've gone to Sanders County, Lincoln County. I've spent a lot of time in every one of the 16 counties and in both of the tribal nations. I've had people refuse to shake my hand. I've had people spit at me. But I keep showing up. And so I think the first job is to refuse to let this discourse, this uncivil discourse, control us. We're better than this. And I'm the 6th of 10 kids. I rode in the middle of our Olympic gate. I know the value and the power of the middle. I know what it takes to bring people together. I've done it my whole life. As an attorney with a solo practice, I've worked with people across Montana. I do water rates. I have a lot of really conservative clients. And I've had these conversations. I've made Montana work for Montanans. And so I think showing up, I also would say that the thing that I love most about Montana and America is our ability to own the things that we've done wrong. And we've done things wrong. But we're great because we look in the mirror, we know we can do it better, and I will make you proud to be your representative in Congress. And I'll show up for you always. Thank you.
Mr. Lamb.
I think this is a great question. And I've showed up to every single debate I've been invited to. I give a great big thank you to Monica Cornell for inviting me and including us. We have big differences, but we are working together for the people so they get to hear both sides of what we believe and what we're going to represent the people. So this is what it's all about. We have to work together no matter our differences. We got to put party aside. We are Americans, we are Montanans fighting for one cause, and that's for the people of Montana. And that's what I will continue doing if I'm elected, is fighting for the people. I will be that person in the middle that will represent both sides of the aisle, no matter your religion, your race, or where you're from. And being from a really religious family, I know what it's like to be totally different than the rest of the world. I grew up in a very conservative Mennonite Amish type background. We looked at the rest of the people like English. They were totally someone else. That's how we referred to them. And we can't just do that. We have to look at everyone alike. We can't. We got to represent everybody, not just ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just awkward silence for a moment while I get the round 2 questions. We'll go back to our original order. I will deliver the microphone once again.
You're getting good at this.
One thing I can do well. Thanks very much to the people who are sorting questions back there. And thanks to everybody here tonight who put questions in the bowls. This would not be interesting without that. Thank you very much. So beginning back with Mr. Beale. Yep, JP. The question reads, it appears we have a revolving door at the jail and repeat offenders. Why does that happen?
Minute and a half, huh? So, a couple things. Number one, if you hear about someone who was released multiple times in a day, a judge had nothing to do with that. You can call us lazy or whatever, but we have court once a day. So at the worst, we can only do it once. Bigger picture than that, when COVID started, some big changes happened to the jail. And the short version is, the sheriff shut it down to misdemeanors. His choice, his decision, he said, no misdemeanor offenses are going. And then we got misdemeanor violent offenses to get back in, and we got misdemeanor DUI second and thirds back in after a while. But it was a struggle, and it was a struggle that frankly the judges had to do to get changed. So I understand the frustration of law enforcement. Frankly, they come to me and talk to me about it and say, how do we fix this? And I say, well, we'll keep working on it. We'll keep making progress to expand that list, expand the list of what the sheriff will allow back into the jail.
Thank you. Mr. Burt?
Again, I agree. 90 seconds is not near enough time for this because it is very complicated. You know, when COVID did hit, there was some decisions that had been made within the sheriff's office about what to do because of not just concern for the inmates, but also people that are working at the detention center. So a lot of the less violent offense people they did look for alternatives to get them, alternative release methods for them. What happened almost immediately after that was that the jail filled up with violent offenders, repeat offenders. It filled back up to the point that it was constantly at capacity. How do I know that? Because my wife and my son both work at the jail. I have friends that work at the jail, and it wasn't as if they closed the doors and non-misdemeanor offenses were not being let in there. There were a list of misdemeanor offenses that were allowed to go to the jail. The reason it appears to be a revolving door is because it is. It's exactly what's been going on. And again, don't take my word for it. Talk to the law enforcement officers in this community. They're very frustrated with being out on the streets, dealing with somebody, and then having that person being released before they can even get their paperwork done, often with no bond or any other type of monitoring.
Thank you. Ms. Holloway?
Okay, I'm going to talk really fast. We are a bond state, or bail state, and so a person is innocent until proven guilty. They are entitled to bond. If a person has the ability to post bond, they can post bond and be out of jail. That does not have anything to do with the court system if you're talking about misdemeanors. Felonies, Judge Beale and I changed something within the last 4 years, in that the felony defendants going into custody used to be able to bond out. That was a glitch that was happening in Missoula County. Per statute, they should have been seeing a judge before they got out. So we took that seriously. We worked with our other criminal justice partners and collaborated to make sure that those felony defendants stay in custody. I sat on the steering committee of the Jail Diversion Master Plan. That all came about because nationally we talk about nonviolent offenders filling up our jails. I look at the jail numbers. I kept watching the data. We do not have nonviolent misdemeanors filling up our jails. Who do Judge Beale and I have jurisdiction over? Our misdemeanor defendants that are charged in Missoula County. So there's a difference between municipal court, there's a difference between justice court, and the clientele is completely different. And so when we talk about somebody getting out of jail, they've either posted bond, or they were released, or maybe somebody declined to prosecute the charge. So there's a lot of factors that go into play. And so keeping that in mind, there are different places to point the fingers. And my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Renault?
One of the things that I would like to do if I'm elected would be to, if I'm allowed, I would like to make sure that whoever comes before me, if they are a repeat offender, I would like to know what their history is, what it is that they have done, and what the level of crime has been, to get a perspective on who this person is. I think one of the wonderful things about justice of the peace is that you have an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life at the beginning, in many cases, of their life. You might have a teenager, You might have a first-time offender. You might have somebody that has really goofed up big time. And maybe you can do something to turn their life around. But when you have somebody that is running through the streets of Missoula doing things with a machete, or you have something horrific like stealing a child, and they happen to come up in front of us, which they may or may not, but if there is something really bad that happens in front of us that we talk to this person, I want to set the bail as high as I'm legally allowed to set it, so that it makes it rough on them to get out.
Thanks very much. We'll pass the baton down to Mr. Curdy, who will respond first to this question. Just gotta make sure I get it right here. The 1972 state constitution enshrines the fundamental right to privacy. How will you and the legislature protect this right, which gives women the ability to make decisions surrounding their families and also ensures that women are equal to men in bodily autonomy?
Thank you. So let's, the best thing we can do is to abide with the Constitution and its right to privacy as it's now written, period. I mean, it's really straightforward. The Supreme Court of the state of Montana has said that the right to privacy in the state guarantees the right to make your own healthcare decisions, period. It's simple. It can be answered in 15 seconds. I think I've overstated my 15 seconds. Okay, that's it, period.
Thank you. Mr. Cheetah?
Well, we're talking about two issues here. We're talking about a general right to privacy, and then we're talking about a woman's right. I think women have to have the right to make a choice. We need to educate them on what the right choice is. Personally, I'm pro-life, have been, and I'm not going to deviate from that. I believe that if you take a look at the makeup of a child in the womb, that individual is a unique individual. Chromosomically, physiologically, it's different. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think the legislature needs to be the overarching authority. But there are certain areas in which we involve ourselves. And when we talk about bodily autonomy, we just went through a COVID pandemic where people were told they had to get shots in order to keep their job. I have a nephew who was required in order to stay in his job to get a shot. He developed myocarditis. He's 27 years old, the kid's in great shape. Where was his choice for bodily autonomy? We see really a deviation or a hypocrisy in that. If we're going to allow autonomy on one side, we better allow it on both sides. If we don't do that, then we are being hypocritical. But there are certain places where the legislature inserts itself because it's the right thing to do. And I believe that there are times when we're going to make decisions. Not in every case, but I believe when it comes to the right to life, it's sacred, and I'll protect and defend it.
Thank you. Ms. Hellegard will respond next. The question for Ms. Hellegard and Mr. Jackson. Do you think Missoula elections are fair and legal?
Well, I was hoping you'd ask me that one. From my perspective, we have work to do. There's stuff that the election officials want us to do. A matter of fact, a simple one is clean up some definitions in our election laws. They're contradictory and they're not real clear on what the legislative intent was. But I would also follow up with, if I was going to state I ran a clean, fair election, I would more than welcome anybody in the public to come and prove that I have. I would not withhold information from them. We've asked simple questions. Why were there 2 more boxes in the second envelope count than there were the first? Why were there 2 colored envelopes in the second count, but only 1 in the first? So I think we have work to do. But that being said, I believe that we have done a real disservice to our country by not letting everyone know that your ballot is your Willy Wonka golden ticket, and you should treat it like it is a sacred document, because your life depends on it.
Mr. Jackson?
So the Missoula County elections have been reviewed by the state, by Missoula County, and by the GOP, Missoula County GOP. They all found little to no irregularities and no reason to think any questions were involved in the results from the last election in Missoula County. I have full faith that all three of those organizations did their homework and they came to a reasonable conclusion. Who we vote for is important, and I understand that it doesn't always feel good when it comes down to the end, but the results were the results. And the results were the results because those people showed up. And so I want to take a chance, the second here. I hosted this forum many, many times when I was chair of the community council. We always invited all of the statewide offices and all of the federal offices to show up. Not once did any of them ever show up. So the fact that Ms. Trinell and Mr. Lamb are here is amazing, and I want to thank you for coming to listen to Lolo. Lolo deserves to be heard, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chambers will respond next. And the question for the commissioners is, what is your long-term goal for the homeless? And why do you welcome them with open arms when most of them are from outside Missoula County?
Well, I've never really gone out and opened my arms up to any of them. But to start that off, I actually believe that we have three populations that are in our homeless camps. I believe that we have to take care of the mentally ill, which also is substance abuse victims that are out there. They are constantly in harm. We hear from the volunteer firemen that go out there when their meds are received, they're stolen, the men are raped. It's just not a humane place to have people that have needs. We need to work with our governor. We need to get our bed space back operating at Warm Springs, and we need to actually look at giving some revenue more to our Western Montana Health Center right here in Missoula County so that we can help those that are in need and give them the counseling that they need. Another third of the population, I feel, are those that did get displaced during COVID and came to Montana because we were an open state compared to other states that were closed down. They came here in the perfect storm when housing went up and lumber was short and everything else kind of worked its way into a housing crisis. And we need to help those people get into attainable housing. And I am really housed in doing that. And then we need to take the criminals and put them in jail. Thank you.
And Mr. Stromer?
Thanks. And the question's partly based on a myth that just is not the case. If you take our temporary safe outdoor space, just this side of Buckhouse Bridge, I've heard allegations that this is just filled with folks outside the community flocking here for our great services. That is just not accurate. The majority of folks who are in that location are actually folks who have been in this community for quite some time. We as a community are a caring community. My personal religious faith calls upon me to not worry so much about whether you're giving that person a handout or a hand up. Just put out your stinking hand and try to help your neighbors. And so we are investing in this temporary safe outdoor space. It's moving to a new location by the detention facility later this year. And the goal is to get people on a path to success in life. We see folks who are struggling downtown. If you walk by the county courthouse, I guarantee that the folks you're seeing out there who are struggling, who are homeless, who are houseless, are 99%, I can tell you, are 99% likely to be suffering from mental issues, from addiction issues and disorders. We are going to be standing up a facility on the Western Montana Mental Health Campus to try to screen those folks and keep them out of the ER.
Thank you very much. Next question for Ms. Pabst. How can you help ensure accountability and transparency on the county level?
Well, thank you. When I first ran for election in 2014, one of my primary goals was to increase transparency at the county attorney's office. As you'll recall, we were in the midst of a war with the Department of Justice as well as our federal partners in Missoula at the U.S. Attorney's Office. My first order of business was to settle that lawsuit and to sort of reach across and bury the hatchet and work together, and we've done that. I've also committed to transparency, and for the reason that it's important for me to communicate with the people who I represent. So I go on Talkback every Friday. It's not always pleasant, it's usually awkward, and I usually say something stupid, but I've committed to doing that, to letting you know what's happening in crime trends in Missoula County. We have a website. We also have engaged in several public outreach events, including going into the schools, going into the civic groups, and not a week goes by where I'm not out talking to some group about what we're doing and the work that we're doing. We're really proud of the innovative work that we've been doing, as well as some of the national recognition that we've gotten for that work.
Thank you. Ms. Vasika will be next. What is your primary goal as county auditor if you win?
I'm very happy you asked that question. Thank you, whoever asked that. My primary goal as county auditor is to make sure that your taxpayer dollars are going to where they're designated to go. I will preface this by saying my mother and my best friend are on the left side, my father's on the right side. I consider myself more in the middle, but it has nothing to do with this office. This has nothing to do with this office because as an auditor, you're supposed to audit things. You're not supposed to make policy. You're not supposed to legislate. You're not supposed to bring your political ideologies into this office. If you want to do that, run for a different office. What you're supposed to do as an auditor is to make sure that your public tax dollars are going to where they're earmarked for. The county commissioners make the budget. They make sure that whatever they vote for goes into whatever dollars go into whatever funds they want them to go to. As the auditor, you're supposed to audit to make sure those funds go into that, no matter your political or personal beliefs. On the state level, there recently was a state audit where there was some FWP employees who used the Lewis and Clark Caverns for a wedding, and they did not use the permits, or they did not actually get permits, but they just let it slide. That is an example of an audit. There also was 1,700 miles of a state vehicle that were not accounted for personal use. That is an example of an audit. So audits have no personal or political beliefs. It is basically just making sure that your taxpayer dollars are going to where they're designated to go.
Thank you. With Mr. Wall?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I really want to expand our internal audit function. I've been meaning to do this for a few years. It had been gone by the wayside when we undertook to take on procurement much more from my predecessor, and I think that's a very good thing. I don't think she did wrong in doing that, but now we're trying to keep procurement under our auspices and add that internal audit function. We still do this. We do monthly cash counts at the treasurer's office. We still check cash handling at animal control at the treasurer's office and elsewhere. But I would like to get to every department and take a look at their policies and procedures. I would also, one of the things I really want to do is start getting all those policies and procedures written down. So many of these procedures in Missoula County are just passed on from one employee to another, as we have been a very small county government, and as the county has grown, the county government has grown a little bit more complex, and we can't just rely on older employees teaching the younger employees, well, this is how you do it. We actually have to get written procedures down. So that's something I'd like to really tackle here in my next term.
Thank you. Next question from Mr. Lamb and Ms. Tranel in that order. How can you help make sure rural voices are heard?
By going to all these meetings like this all across the state. It's one way. We have to listen to the people. We have to get the message out. We do live in a day and time where it's very hard to, especially in a big state like Montana, but we need to hear these individual voices from each one of these counties. And I believe it's very important. I have 12 children, so I know the chaos of listening to all 12. They all want to go this way or that way, and we got this school program or this church meeting or what are we doing? But we have to, as a congressperson, listen to all the voices from both sides of the aisle, be willing to help in any way we can. We've been on some Native American, two different Native American, we actually went to 3 total kind of different places, but in Polson, over by Browning, and then there was another one before then, Ronan, and we've listened to some of the Native Americans that don't have a voice in Montana or very little. So they need someone in Congress that's going to represent them and listen to what their needs are, where they're being overlooked so many times over all the issues on these tribal lands. So if I'm elected, I will definitely support people and listen to the people that don't have a voice.
Thank you. Ms. Tranel?
Thank you for this question. And I would just give you an example. I was at the parade in Dillon. I was shaking hands with folks. And I shook hands with a guy with a MAGA hat on. And he said, "You have my vote. Don't forget about us." And I think to me, that's what distills so much of where we are right now. I know rural Montana. I understand it. I lived it. When my family moved to Golden Valley County, we raised the population of the county 1%. So I get it. But I think it's more than that. I've heard so many of you talking tonight about so many of the different issues we're all grappling with right now: homelessness, addiction, mental health, inflation, and people are hurting. In this district, what I have heard is people are hurting, and everybody wants to be heard. It's not just rural Montana, it is rural Montana, but it's also our urban areas. It's a homeless camp. I went and visited that. I've done ride-alongs with our law enforcement. We all want to feel represented and heard, and I think that's a dignity that we give you by showing up. That's why it's important to me to show up, and I will keep doing that. I'm the 6th of 10 kids. I'm a middle kid. I have the terrible fear of being left out. So I will always show up, and that's how you know your voice, whether you're in Missoula or in the most rural areas of this new district. You will be heard with me as your representative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're waiting round 3 of questions. Don't forget there's treats in the back. Restrooms and other great things. Thank you. All right, beginning with Mr. Burt. Do you believe the justice of the peace is the justice of the peace for the people it serves?
Yes, absolutely. And additionally, whether the people live within the city limits or in the county. Unfortunately, like I said earlier today, one of the misrepresentations that happens for folks that live in the rural areas like Lolo, Frenchtown, Sealy Lake, you don't get a voice in who your municipal judges are. You don't get a voice in who the mayor is. A lot of times, the repeat offenders, the violent offenders that I'm talking about come from those jurisdictions, and with the expansion of free public transportation, a lot of that is coming out into the counties. We've seen a lot of that happening. We're on the South Side Road, expanding up Highway 12 to Elk Meadows. I think that it's critically important that the Justice of the Peace understands that they represent all of Missoula, including the people that live within the city limits. Just because the people that live out in the rural areas just don't have that voice with what's going on within the city limits.
Thank you. Mr. Beale?
I'm not 100% sure I understood that question, but I'm going to try to answer it anyway. Yes, we are the justice of the peace for the entire county. Every inch of that county, whether it's within city limits, in Lolo, in Frenchtown, in Ovando, wherever it is, we are the justice of the peace for them. We are not the municipal court judge. I'm also not the sheriff. I'm also not the mayor. I'm also not the county attorney. Each of us has a lane, and we can only deal with what our lane is. And what we can do as the justice of the peace to make our lane better is to make ourselves more and more accountable. The thing that I think I'm most proud of in terms of accountability is that when we started, we worked with the commissioners, Judge Holloway and I, to become a court of record, which means that every word that we say in court is taken down. If you want to know what happened, you can find out. Just ask us. We'll give you those documents. We'll give you that recording. You can know everything that happens in that courtroom, which I think is the bare minimum for accountability. These things, this court process, half of which is civil, has real consequences for all of you. Whether that's because you were the victim in a criminal case that got appealed and now doesn't start over, or you filed a small suit against somebody who skipped out without doing the work, there's accountability now in that process for you because we did that to be a court of record. Thanks.
Ms. Renault?
Something that I haven't mentioned, and I think I'll mention it here, is that what I've been hearing from people, and I heard it in Sealy Lake when we did a communication with the people that were there. It was teeny weeny, we only had a few people there, but I heard that it went out to a lot of people that couldn't make it in. When somebody receives a settlement, after there has been a presentation, one of the things that justices of the peace can do is assign how much the settlement will be. But then you have to collect it. And one of the ladies in the audience said, we need to know how to work through the court so that we can get our money from the person that has been told they have to pay me. And I think as a justice of the peace, that would be something I would do. I am also extremely concerned about the victims of crime and the people who are harmed by people that don't do what they're supposed to do. In the case of landlords that own property who are trying to give housing to people who are renting, I would be very actually sympathetic toward people that have had their property damaged. And I would want to listen very carefully to the presentation of both sides.
Thank you. Ms. Holloway?
Thank you for the question, and I also will answer it the way I think it, the way I interpret it. As a justice of the peace, am I a justice of the peace for the whole county? Yes, I am. And we talked a lot so far this evening about crime. Justice Court has a significant other department that we deal with, and that's civil matters. And what we deal with in civil matters are collections, bad debts, we deal with small claims. We issue orders of protection. Most of the landlord-tenant cases come before Justice Court if they're not over $15,000 now. And so what happens is we see a lot of the same family members who are, same people who can be met with some barriers, and we're understanding what those are. And so we're seeing those people from Lolo, Frenchtown, Sealy Lake, anywhere outside in the county. Clinton, we find value in mediation. In all of our civil cases, we ask them to go to mediation first, because there is value in two people sitting across the table and coming up with some type of resolution. Because if that matter does end up going to the judge, not all parties are going to have a say, right? It's better for our community when you're at the table, you're feeling like you're heard, and you come to some type of resolution. So yes, one of the things beneficial from Zoom, or from COVID, I hate to say that, but it was Zoom, and we still do that, and we still allow people outside of the county, or in the outreaches of the county, to call in because we understand the need to save the time. And I ran out of time. Thank you.
Good. Next question will be for Mr. Cheetah and Mr. Curdy, beginning with Mr. Cheetah. Montanans rightfully enjoy access to public lands where we can engage in outdoor activities that connect us to our roots and bring us closer together. Yet these lands which were designated for public use are increasingly being privatized. How will you and the legislature prevent the erosion of our public lands and protect our right as Montanans to access these lands?
First of all, I'm going to start off, when I went to 4,600 doors and asked people what the most important things were, none of those questions have been asked yet. And I think that's a telling thing. I think we need to focus on that because, as I said before, The leading issues were inflation, the economy, high gas costs. People are concerned that they can't put gas in their car. I've had parents that were talking about the trouble they had buying school supplies for their kids. Property taxes, unaffordable housing, those are the major issues. Now, we want to talk about public lands. In 2015, Senator Jennifer Fielder introduced a bill that would have prevented Montana from selling public lands. And it was opposed by the Democrat Party. And the next day, they held a rally for public lands in the Rotunda. In this last legislative session, House Bill 320 was introduced by Steve Gunderson from Libby. And it would have said any federal lands transferred to the state of Montana could not be sold in fee title to a private party. It was opposed by the Democrats. I think the vote was 64 to 33. Now, there's never been a case in my 8 years, 4 terms in the legislature, where there's ever been a Republican that said, let's sell public lands to private individuals. And that's one of the leading misnomers you're going to hear, is that we want to sell it. That's just patently false. So we'll continue to protect private lands.
Thank you. Mr. Curdy?
So I appreciate him, my opponent, mentioning those 2 bills. I would encourage all of you to go and look on the public record what was said, what was in those bills, and the like. And I can tell you that what was said a few minutes ago is truly misrepresented in what was said. Those bills, in fact, behind the scenes would have caused the transfer of federal lands to the state. There's no question about it. Don't go back and look at the record, look at the testimony, and see what was said. What's in the platform of his party? Transfer public lands to the state. There's no question about it. It's pure and simple. As a person who made my living working the public lands, they're critically important to me. My wife and I spent our free time on our horses, literally on every trail into the west side of the Bitters, into the Bob, into the Scapegoat, into the Anaconda Guntler. We know what our public lands are valued. We have people who have come to this state and they're buying up lands and cutting off access into our public lands. Look at how many times we're fighting closed roads. We can't get the legislature to actually fund programs to keep people from closing roads because they don't want people coming onto the land. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Jackson and Ms. Helgard in that order. The question, it's actually 2 questions on one slip. I'm going to read them both. Do you live in the district? Have you run in other districts? Go.
So, yeah, I live right over there. I feel personally that we need to represent our community. That's why I'm out here. I've said it many times before. I grew up in the Bitterroot Valley. That automatically makes me pretty conservative. My first job was changing irrigation pipe and bucking hay bales. That makes me pretty rural. I'm at the end of a long dirt road. I realized that my neighbors are tired of not being represented anymore, and that's why I chose to run in this district. I chose this because this is my home. It's a massive district, like I said earlier. There is Elmar Estates is in it. I actually lived in Elmar when I got out of high school. Alberton and Petty Creek are in it. You know, I've played up there. I helped evacuate Alberton when the train derailed. This is my home. This is the community that I live in and I've been in for the last 25 years. I'm talking to people at the doors and they're glad that they have somebody that feels the same pain they do. I have a 29-year-old work truck out there. When Brad talks about gas, I know it because I don't live next to the city. And you all know it too. We drive farther. I'm going to do everything I can to help my community, and I'm not here for a party. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Helgard?
I do not live in the district, but like I said, I've got a son that lives in this district, and my parents lived here. And I bucked bales. I used to train horses when I lived in Stevensville. I graduated from Sentinel High School. I've spent the last 20 years traveling all over the state, helping small communities get transportation for their seniors, individuals with disabilities, veterans. So I know not only Lolo is a small community, I know the other small communities in Montana, including Alberton and Petty Creek. And one of the things that I proposed as soon as I heard that they were trying to impose a resort tax on this community, and I would say if any community has an argument that they are not a resort community, it is Lolo. You guys voted down a ski resort. So what I proposed, and I've talked to quite a few legislators and including the governor, that what we need to do, that $800 million that they have sitting in emergency funds, they should dedicate just the interest from that to go to a fund so that you guys can get federal infrastructure loans. You can use USDA, EPA, HUD, all kinds of things. And that would not raise your taxes, and it would bring more of the money that you pay to the feds back to your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question for our county commissioner candidates, beginning with Mr. Stromer. Why increase taxes when we are in the middle of a recession?
So we just went through a budget process setting the FY fiscal year 23 budget. Through this budget process and every prior budget process I have been through, what we sometimes hear from folks is, local government, you need to tighten your belts. But rarely, if ever, do I hear anyone say, which rungs on the belt do you want tightened? What I hear from folks is, I want at least the same level of service or more service, and I want to pay less. Local governments in the state of Montana are already, by state statute, state law, limited to only increasing taxes by half of the rate of inflation over the past 3 years on average. That is not sustainable in the business world. It's not sustainable in government. So yes, we have an antiquated property tax system in the state of Montana. The state of Montana can gloat all it wants about sitting on $2 billion that it wants to redistribute to Montanans, but that is income tax. Property tax is not a great way to fund local government. As we all know, there is no necessary connection between what your property's value is and your ability to pay. Much of the property tax on your bill is not county government. It's schools, it's fire districts, it's voter-approved levies or bonds. So go to Missoula County's website, Property Information System. You can see in a pie chart what you paid for taxes and challenges yet to come.
Thank you. Ms. Chambers?
Thank you, Mr. Stromeyer. I actually am up here as a candidate because this is exactly the issue that I'm fighting for. If I ran my business like our county is running their business, I would be out of business. My business is home building and property management. I look back 2 years ago at what I make, minus 15%, and I run a budget based on that. I work within my means. We cannot keep taxing our citizens out of their homes or enabling them not to get into a home. We need to help our citizens in a time of inflation, and recession is coming upon us. I want to fight for that. I want to bring back free enterprise. I want to stop having our local governments be our developers and our builders. I want to be arm in arm with our local government, and I want to go through regulation processes that we can streamline our development and our housing and be able to bring back housing to our community and help our citizens. I want to bring back our revenue from our gambling and our lottery to pay for our schools as it was voted at the state level and not just put it into a general fund. I want to look at grazing leases again and bring back that revenue. We have a lot of opportunities here. We are the highest paying county in Montana. Let's look at that.
Thank you. We're actually going to skip a couple of offices all the way down to the congressional candidates, if you don't mind passing that down. Nothing personal, I just don't have a question for you.
I'll have Peterson do mine.
This may well be our last formal question tonight, because I don't know how much time we'll be able to get through a whole round with everybody, but we'll see how this goes. Let's see here. We will begin with Ms. Tranell this time. How will you help provide property tax relief to Montana families?
Thank you. So I think the questions about property taxes are really about the state. And that is the state legislature's job to do that. But what we're looking at right now, what can I do in this federal congressional office to bring some relief to Montanans who are really struggling with inflation, with housing, with high costs? I have an affordability plan. It's on my website, monicatranell.com. The things that I would do that will make a difference for all of you, I will take on corporate monopolies. I've been doing that my entire career. We've seen the meatpacking plants. Our producers are getting lower prices. We're paying higher prices. Who's getting the money? The guys in the middle. That has to stop. I know how to do it. I've been doing it my whole career. I also want to build things here, and that's a really big deal. Let me give you, and this will bring some relief to property taxes if we have more businesses. One example of the things that I will help work on here in Montana. In Butte, at the industrial park, there's a $1 billion green hydrogen project that's being developed and looked at. It will take the water from the mine, use that water to make green hydrogen, and ship the waste product down to the salt mines in Utah. It's an incredible concept. It's being looked at. It brings a lot of jobs and revenue to Montana. Beaverhead County, a county with a tax base of $1 billion. They have a $500 million solar project that's getting built there right now. That's half of their revenue is coming there. So these are things that will bring good jobs, good revenue streams. I know how to do these. I've done these projects from soup to nuts. I've worked with landowners, project developers, the project operators, the utilities, the consumers. I will bring these dollars to Montana, and that will bring relief for all of the taxes. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb?
It's a great question. As running for Congress, I don't know if it quite applies because we wouldn't be involved in land taxes here in Montana. I did run 2 years ago for a state senate, District 26 out of Madison County, and I did propose in that race a property tax type proposal or bill. And that would had 2 or 3 things. I think property taxes in many ways are unfair. It seems like the landowners, we pay all the bills. And I own property here in Montana, and I know my taxes just keep going up. And having a family of 12 children, sometimes it's difficult to make that big payment once or twice a year to pay for our property. One of the proposals I would have is just like our license plates, we have permanent license plates. I wanted to make it so senior citizens and veterans would be exempt from property taxes. They could file something like the homestead exemption. We have so many other things that senior citizens could file with their clerk of court, and veterans, and they could not have to pay taxes on property. Another one would be putting a sales tax. Nobody likes to hear that, but we have so many people that visit tourists that could help pay for these property taxes instead of putting the burden on the taxpayers.
Thank you very much. Helpers, where are we with our... We have less than 15 minutes. We will honor your time tonight. We want to give folks a few minutes to mix and mingle if we can. All right, we've got questions for Justice of the Peace again. Oh, I have failed to do my job. Gosh, here I was so excited about doing something right tonight. Dang it. All right, Mr. Beale, besides criminal matters, what does Justice Court deal with?
We'll do the 45-second
How's like a 45-second version go? Yeah.
Perfect. Civil cases. 50% of what we do is those. These are the little things that impact you, sometimes not that little. Whether it's getting sued for a debt, maybe that you don't know. Whether it's getting evicted from your house for bad reasons, or trying to get someone out of your rental who won't leave. All those things are what we do, as well as temporary order of protection to protect folks from domestic violence. That's 50% of what we do.
Mr. Burt?
I don't think I have anything to add to that. We have talked about a couple of these different forms about these percentages, what these percentages are, and that being 50% civil, and 49% misdemeanor offenses, with 1% being felony cases. I've been a law enforcement officer in this community for a long time, and realistically that means that only 2 out of every 100 cases that police or law enforcement officers make an arrest is a felony. I think that number is probably a little higher than that, but not to take anything away from the civil aspect of the job, because I know it's a big part of it.
Thank you. Ms. Holloway?
So I'll ditto what Judge Beale said. We also oversee 12 staff. We are a department head. We interact with other departments in the county. We attend leadership meetings. We attend administration meetings within the county. But y'all forgot, we officiate a lot of weddings. And that is the very best part of this job. So.
Ms. Renault?
And if she didn't say it, I was going to say that. Because my son and daughter-in-law, who are very happily married, were married by Karen Orzak, who is one of my favorite justices of the peace. And that is one of the most charming things that we do. And interestingly, in the 18,000 voters that I have talked to, that is the only thing people know that a justice of the peace does, is marry people, which I think is kind of cute. But I think one of the things that justices of the peace can do, literally, is to bring peace. And maybe that's why the name is there, because you do become a mediator between bickering that happens between neighbors and businesses.
Thank you. We'll move on to Senate District 49 for the continuation of our speed dating round. We'll start with Mr. Curdy this time. The question reads, the community of Lolo is a child care desert. This puts an extreme burden on families who may struggle to participate in the workforce due to child care needs. In turn, these struggles have negative impacts on families' financial situations and on the economy overall. How will the legislature take steps to make affordable child care a reality in Lolo?
Thank you for the question. So we have a $1.7 billion surplus. So I propose to take some of that money for child care and build local, you said a desert, build local child care facilities in Lolo. We need to make sure we pay our child care providers a decent wage, because we can't get people to get into it because of the wages that are paid. And we need to give parents scholarships so they can have the ability to put their kids into meaningful child care in the state. Child care in this state right now, folks, is a major disaster. We have a lot of work to do. Let's get after it.
Thank you. Mr. Gita?
I heard my opponent earlier say that we're not supposed to take tax dollars and give them to private businesses. I just heard him say, let's take tax dollars and give them to private businesses. That to me is wrong. What we need to do is provide an incentive to private businesses. We need to make it attractive for people to provide that child care. Perhaps one of the reasons why we're seeing a child care issue is that we have such high tax burdens federally and locally that we're required to have 2 people work. So perhaps there's a solution there. There are people who are doing that. But as far as taking tax dollars, those dollars, that $1.7 billion or $1.5 billion, those are your dollars. You should get them back. And then if you decide you want to give them to an organization, you can give them to that organization. But the government does not get involved in businesses like this. They should not be a party to that.
Thank you. Moving on to House District 97, we'll start with Lynn Hellegard. And forgive me, I'm going to read this verbatim. Hopefully it means something. No offense to whoever wrote this question, I just don't fully understand it. How will you prevent ESG from harming Montanans? Environmental, social, governmental, I assume?
Yeah, that's the environmental, social governance that they're trying to replace your credit score with. So what I've done with that is I've already started looking at other states that are implementing this bill, looking at the legislation that they're doing, seeing if there isn't something that we can craft. The one thing that I'm concerned about, most of them only go so far, is taking it to your bank, which they could deny you if you don't have a good score. But I can see them denying people for apartments, for jobs, for all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to take it just like we do any of our discrimination laws and protect the whole. not just the people's bank accounts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
So this is an issue I don't have a lot of research on. One thing I can tell you I've learned going door to door here is if I'm done at the end of the day and there's not 2 things on my list that I have to learn about, I'm not doing it right. The fact of the matter is, this is not an easy job, and there's a lot of things I'm going to have to learn. I learn pretty fast. I've had a record of making sure that I do the right things for the people of Lolo, and I know how bad we're all hurting. I know that working class students and workers can't afford rent. I know that families can't afford childcare, and I know that there's a budget surplus that we can use to make this work for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question for our county commissioner candidates. Ms. Chambers, you'll go first. How would you go about lowering the tax burden for Missoula County residents?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Yes. How would you go about lowering the tax burden for Missoula County residents?
Well, first of all, I really want to educate. I don't think that we should be looking at bonds and levies. I think that everybody just votes those in and doesn't quite understand the extreme tax burden that puts on us. Let's bring back free enterprise. Let's go out like the university does and offer to other businesses, people that I always say middies that have like livestock. Let's let them want to volunteer to start putting up the 4-H building at our fairgrounds instead of burdening all of us while we're under an inflation time and helping us then be able to continue to fundraise and be neighbor to neighbor.
Mr. Stromer.
So I have a slightly different view on this than my opponent in that when it comes to property, well, let me back up. So part of the burden that we face in this county and might face in November is the choices that you make. I don't want to take away from you the choice to vote for a levy or a bond. I want that to be in your hands. Secondly, we had a gas tax, a 2-cent gas tax here in Missoula County that the citizens, the voters of Missoula County voted in, but the legislature stripped that away. That was bringing about $500,000 into this county for road maintenance. We had a marijuana tax, and we are currently using a portion of that for tax relief and a portion of that for road maintenance.
Thanks very much. And with that, I'm actually out of questions, and we have 3 minutes left. The room will be open for a little while afterwards to visit with the candidates, ask the questions that weren't asked. There were a lot of strips of paper back in those buckets, and I know we didn't get to all of them. Thank you all for submitting those questions. Thanks to our candidates, who really, honestly, could have been anywhere tonight. Now is the time for applause. They came here and they showed up for you. So thank you very much for that. I'll turn it over back to Luanne from the community club to round it out.
Yes, thanks Dale for doing this. And thank you guys for coming and engaging in civil, what do I want to say? Very civil. I really appreciate that, how you guys, how everybody got along. And again, to the candidates, thank you very much for coming out. I've lived here since 1984. I've never seen this many candidates, and I don't know if I've seen this many people in the audience. I know that probably the most we've ever had was 7 or 8 candidates show up, and for you guys to come and spend your night with us and doing something very worthwhile, reaching a lot of people. It's not just here. You're on Facebook Live with MCAT right now, and you're going to be video on demand when people want to pull it up, maybe before they go to bed at night. I don't know when they're going to watch that, but they're going to. So again, thank you. And Jennifer, thank you for really helping with this. And Jen helped too. You helped put our logo together and do all that. When we decided we were going to do this, it was like, okay, I've never done this before, but we're all in. Both hands and feet, all of us. So we did. And Michelle, thank you for being the timer. And Pat, thank you as well for that community grant. Means a lot to us. We did this. You talk about budgets. You want to know what our budget was for this? It was 0. We did this entire thing on 0 budget. All right, thank you.